Hello, Colorado. I'm Matt Connelly, and welcome to our kitchen table conversation with Republican gubernatorial candidate Heidi Ganahl. Heidi, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Matt. I'm excited to talk to you about all the things going on in Colorado right now.
Me too. So we're gathered here today as ballots are going out across the state. Coloradans are getting ready to make their choice for who will be Colorado's next governor. And we're also gathered here today around the kitchen table, a place where Coloradans celebrate some of their biggest successes in life, and a place where Colorado families make some of their toughest decisions in life. You're running for governor. You've experienced great success in your business career. Tell us, what has led you to this point running for governor, and what makes you uniquely qualified to be Colorado's next governor?
Well, I love this state with all my heart. I grew up down the road in Monument, the small town by the Air Force Academy, went to CU Boulder, got my master's at DU, and started my business here, Camp Bow Wow, and grew it here for many, many years. So this state is near and dear to my heart. I want my kids and my grandkids to stay here and live, but right now it's not affordable. We've got skyrocketing crime. Just things are broken. So as a mom, I call myself a mom on a mission. I'm on a mission to turn the state around and get things looking good again for our kids, for our communities, and make sure that we can have a bright future here for our children.
Yeah, Heidi, your business career, you've built these businesses from the ground up. Some of your advocacy work, you've built them from the ground up. It seems like Colorado might need some of that right now. They might need someone to build things up from the ground up because we're in such a bad place right now. How do you think that those skills will translate from your business career into the governor's office?
Well, Matt, I'm a problem solver. I'm an outsider. I'm not a politician. So I just love to roll up my sleeves and get to work. And I have big, bold ideas for Colorado. When I started Camp Bow Wow with just one doggy daycare, I grew to love helping others start their own businesses. So I franchised it and grew it over many years into the country's largest pet care franchise. And at the same time, I saw the importance of giving back. So we started the Bow Wow Buddies Foundation to go with it. And we were able to find homes for over 10,000 rescue pups through working with the franchisees. And that's one of the things I'm most proud of. But after I sold the business, I recognized that I had a lot of skill sets that might be helpful in helping fix some of these problems that we're facing. So I started Moms Fight Back, a charity, to help fix the family court system and help moms that are dealing with really tough issues like domestic violence and child abuse, incest. And then I also started the Fight Back Foundation to help entrepreneurs that had a special heart for working on products or services that helped kids in Colorado. So it's been a joy to apply my kind of business sense to the social issues we're facing and the political issues we're facing. And then, of course, I ran for regent in 2016 and have been on the front lines of education reform.
Well, some of the issues that have been big issues in this election are inflation, crime. We're going to hop into some of those issues and get your take on how we got to this point in the first place. Heidi, one of the top issues in Colorado is inflation. We lead the country in inflation, an unfortunate statistic to lead the country in. And Coloradans are feeling this every day, but they're getting mixed messages from the people running for office, namely Governor Jared Polis, who's trying to tell them that no, actually, he's done an amazing job. But in many ways, reality has spoken differently about that subject. What are you going to do on the topic of inflation, and how are you going to help Coloradans cut costs in their life and get back to being able to spend their money on things that really matter to them?
Yeah, Matt, I mean, we have 16% inflation here in Colorado since Joe Biden took office, the highest in the country. What does that mean to the average Coloradan? It's costing them $11,700 more a year to live, or almost $1,000 a month more to live and work and raise a family. So I have put together a plan to go to zero income tax here in Colorado over 8 years, so over 2 terms, and we'll do everything we can to put more money back into the people's pockets of Colorado so that they can deal with these rising, skyrocketing costs, right? One of the things that the governor did, which was made me shake my head a bit, was say that he was giving our Tabor refunds back, but he didn't call them Tabor refunds. He called them Colorado cash back, and moved the deadline up right before the election so everyone in Colorado that qualified got a $750 check. Well, that's constitutionally required in Colorado that the money comes back. It was a political move, and it cost the taxpayers $3 million because he decided to do that. So that really upset me, and it was not being honest with the voters of Colorado. But back to the 0% income tax plan and how we get more money back into the pockets of the people of Colorado, we're going to look at adjusting those Tabor refunds so they come as permanent income tax reductions, and that we also call fees what they are, taxes, and that they go into the general fund and can be reappropriated according to the will of the people rather than politicians. We also want to attract new business and industry here, which has been proven. That's what happens when you go to zero income tax. You look at Tennessee, they were at 6% state income tax. They went to zero over 6 years, and they have one of the most thriving economies in the country. We're also going to do an audit to find fraud and waste. We think we'll probably find 5 to 10% there that we can reduce in the budget. The governor likes to say that we're going to slash and burn programs and services. Absolutely not true. We don't have to do this. This is a slow introduction over time. We're going to tighten our belt a bit and reduce the size of government about 10% a year in my first term. But since Jared Polis grew it by 23%, then it's mostly undoing what he's done. So it's, skinnying down the size of government a little bit, which goes with what we were talking about, getting the government out of our lives.
Yeah.
And also making sure that we're spending the dollars on the right things, and then being very cognizant of our future here. And the way to a bright future in Colorado is to make sure we have a healthy economy, and zero income tax will get us there.
Well, one of the biggest drivers of inflation is energy, the price of gas, the price to heat your home. Governor Polis has implemented a lot of policies here in Colorado that have made it tougher to produce energy, that have made the cost of energy rise here in Colorado. As governor, would you do anything to address those issues? Do you have the ability to do anything to address those issues?
I do. I can start by replacing the people on the Oil and Gas Commission and make sure that we roll back some of these over-the-top regulations that are decimating the energy development industry here in Colorado. We produce some of the cleanest energy on the planet right here in Colorado. We have the second largest natural gas reserve in the country here. So why not produce energy here where we do it right, where we care about clean air, clean land, clean water, instead of looking to Saudi Arabia or Venezuela or other places that don't care as much as we do about the environment. So let's get them back to work producing, and that will also refill the coffers when we look at zero income tax as well.
Crime has exploded here in Colorado over the last 4 years. How did we get to this point where things have gotten so bad on so many different levels? You mentioned auto theft, to drugs. It's been a very difficult time for a lot of Colorado families. How do you think that Governor Polis's policies have contributed to this situation?
Well, he's leading an effort very similar to what we're seeing around the nation and with our president, actually, to be soft on crime, to put in catch and release policies so that it's very difficult to keep someone in jail. We have the 4th highest recidivism rate in the country, which means repeat offenders are doing most of the crimes.
Yeah.
And I hear from law enforcement that their hands are tied. They just can't catch bad guys and put them in jail. It's very, very difficult. And so what I can do is have the backs of law enforcement, make sure that we fund public safety, that the first dollar I spend will be refilling those coffers to make sure that law enforcement has the ability to do their job. I can also cancel our status as a sanctuary state, which makes it really hard for law enforcement and ICE agents to coordinate to stop the flow of fentanyl into Colorado.
Yeah.
And then we've got to make sure that we actually hold criminals accountable and drug dealers accountable. So right now, an auto theft, if you steal an auto that's worth under $2,000, it's a misdemeanor. Well, who does that hurt? It hurts the poorest in our society, the single mom that has a car that's under $2,000 that now has to figure out how to get to work and daycare. So these policies are just terrible, and these have been tied to bad bills that were signed, and decriminalizing fentanyl is one of the worst things that the governor did to our state.
It does impact Coloradans from so many different angles in their wallets and pocketbooks, and also, having their property stolen, as you mentioned with cars. Dee in Summit County submitted a question, and she wanted to know how you're gonna make these criminals actually serve time or face consequences, because she says that right now the criminals are committing these crimes because they don't fear any consequences.
Well, it starts with leadership. So we've got to change out the leaders of Department of Corrections, Department of Public Safety, Department of Justice. I need to clean house on the parole board, put people on that board that actually believe in law and order. And then we've got to do something about qualified immunity so we can recruit and train and retain law enforcement. Right now, they're down in the ranks. It's really difficult. And also make sure we have judges who believe in law and order. So I get to appoint a lot of judges and make sure that we put good people in those slots as well.
Another issue that is huge here in Colorado, we've seen over the last few years, we had coronavirus, we had schools that were shut down. We've seen the impact of those shutdowns because of test scores are so low. And there's a number of other policies from Governor Polis that have contributed to those test scores going down. Our kids just not performing in school the way they should be. And also the mental health crisis that is taking place for kids across this state. How do we arrive at this point with education with our kids in Colorado?
Well, one of the things that's happened are parents are being left out of the conversation. I mean, there's a lot of secrets that are being kept by schools that parents don't feel comfortable with. And so how do we solve that? We go all in on school choice and give parents options to go to other schools, to go to a different ways to educate their kids, and let those dollars follow them. So let the funding follow the families through education savings accounts. That's one of my key ideas to address some of these problems we're seeing in the schools. But we've also got to pay teachers more.
Yeah.
Right now, the average classroom in Colorado gets $250,000 in funding, and only $50,000 of that goes to the teachers. That's not good for our kids. That's not good for our students. So we've got to make sure the money goes back into the classroom and not to more administrators.
How do we get to real school choice here in Colorado? And how would the ESAs that you've proposed work?
Well, similar to what was just passed in Arizona, what would happen is each family would have a savings account, and the state government would put the funding, the dollars that follow the student to the schools into that account, and the family would be able to use those dollars where they saw fit, as long as it fit within the guidelines of, a public school, charter school, private school, religious school, micro school, homeschool, whatever works for them. And if there's a little bit left over, they can use for tutoring or other ways to supplement their kids' education. But that way, the actual education choice is with the parents. And the students all learn differently. I have 4 kids that learn very differently.
Yeah.
And you've got to be very specific to the needs of the child. And that helps them do that.
Well, and one of the things that you talk about in your campaign is that you are a mom and that you're a mom on a mission. I mean, you have an up-close view of what's going on in schools here in Colorado because you have kids that are in school here in Colorado. How do you think that that impacts your view of education here and gives you maybe a bit of an advantage in knowing what these kids are going through?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to those PTA meetings and the soccer tournaments, and I'm listening to other parents, and we're having a lot of tough conversations about how we fix these things. And really, at the end of the day, parents just want to be respected. They want to be included in the conversation, and they don't want secrets kept, at school. That's not the way this should work. Parents should always be the first priority. We've also got to have compassion for our kids. They've been through so much in the last couple years, and that's part of the mental health crisis we're facing. We've got screen addiction, drug addiction. We've got isolation that they've just come through. They weren't allowed to play their sports. So we've got a lot of work to do, and we've got to make sure we're listening to the kids and the parents first, rather than letting administrators who are kind of, 4 steps removed making those decisions, or politicians from the top.
Heidi, Colorado has a fairly extreme abortion law when compared to other states. Here in Colorado, you can abort a baby up until right before that baby is born. And there's a lot of Coloradans who disagree with that policy. Tell me where you stand on the issue of abortion, and particularly on that one topic.
Yeah, Matt, my journey's been pretty bumpy to having a family. Obviously, I'm older, and I have twins that are 10, a 13-year-old and 27-year-old. So I had several miscarriages, and I have so much compassion for women who are facing this really difficult decision. I want to bring common sense back to Colorado, and I do believe abortion should be rare and safe. But what's not common sense is aborting a baby on its birth date, like in the final weeks of pregnancy. And Jared Polis sign that law without the people of Colorado kind of approving it. And so I've made a promise that any changes to abortion law here in Colorado will go back to a vote of the people of Colorado. I don't think that's the place of a politician. I don't think Jared Polis understands that that's not where the heart of people are in Colorado. So yes, I think we have to have a conversation and find a path forward. We've also got to make it easier and less expensive to adopt a child in Colorado. It's 3 years and about $30,000. And then we have 1,500 kids in our foster care system that need to find a home as well.
Heidi, we've experienced a lot of tough times as a country, as a state in the last few years. And I think that voters oftentimes like to know how a possible governor would respond to tough times. In your own life, you've experienced some tough times, and it's not something that you get to talk about often on the campaign trail, but your husband died in a plane accident early in your life. Recently, you had surgery, you had a brain tumor that you had to get removed, but you responded to both of those crises and came out stronger on the other end. Tell us about how you approach crises and how you approach tough times, and why that should give the voters of Colorado confidence that you'll be tough and strong and make the right decisions in office.
Well, thanks, Matt. I did a TEDx talk a few years ago called The Art of the Comeback. And to come back, you give back. And so I've always found that kind of putting your heart and soul into giving to other people and to fixing problems and to really building community is the best way for me to come back through tragedy. And so I'm so honored and blessed to be able to do that now as the governor of Colorado and share my compassion and my love for the people around our state and helping us get back on track. That's how I'm going to, go forward and help other people heal from this crazy time we've had over the last couple of years. I mean, our economy's hurting, our streets are hurting with the crime and homelessness, our kids are hurting with the drug addiction, suicide, the mental health crisis they're facing. So, I will be a leader with a lot of compassion, a lot of love, and make sure that I listen to the hearts of our folks around the state and what they're struggling with.
And you've been traveling the state for a year or two now as a private citizen and then as someone running for office. What's one story that you've heard from a Coloradan that maybe isn't the story that gets talked about all the time, that isn't one of the top issues that voters are concerned about in this election, but something that's really had an impact on that person's life and something that you would like to tackle when you're in office that maybe isn't making headlines every day of the week?
Well, one of my favorite things I've done is visit the various farms and ranchers and orchards, and I've eaten Palisade peaches and Rocky Ford watermelons and had amazing beef from around the state. And I've just learned how incredible the history is here. The farmers and ranchers across our state have been here for generations, and their families want to stay and they want to keep farming and ranching. And it's become so difficult because of the regulations and the lack of respect from our governor and leaders for what they do. Ag is the second largest industry in the state, and 89% of our farms and ranches in Colorado are family owned, and they want to keep it that way. And so I want to be a voice for rural Colorado and have respect and help them protect the industry, but also their ability to make great food for all of us.
And you mentioned a lot of really special places, special industries here in Colorado that make this the best place in the country to live. And we see that from people moving here all the time to come and live in Colorado, a place that we both love so much. What would you say to a new Coloradan who's maybe voting for the first time here in Colorado? What would you say to them about why your path for the future and your vision for the future is the best place to go instead of what Governor Polis has done over the last 4 years?
Well, again, I would ask, are you better off than we were 4 years ago? And if you just moved to Colorado, things were very, very different 4 years ago. We had a thriving economy, the streets were safe, our kids were doing well, and so it's taken a dramatic turn. And I just would hope that they would listen or talk to some people who've lived here for a long time about how things used to be and why they moved here. A lot of people moved here for the amazing outdoors, for, the safety, for the great schools, and that's all, hurting right now. It's not the way it was. So I would ask if they would consider voting for some balance. We have a one-party rule here in Colorado, and perhaps we could find compromise and find a better path forward if we had some balance in our political leanings both ways in leading our government forward.
Another issue that requires compassion but also needs real solutions is the homelessness problem here in Colorado, in our cities, and increasingly in the suburbs as well. How did this happen? I mean, we're at a point where homelessness has grown consistently here in Colorado, and we see the effects in our downtown in Denver and in Colorado Springs and across the state. How do we get to this point where homelessness has become such a rampant problem in Colorado?
Well, a couple things. I mean, crime is out of control in Colorado, and open air drug use, we allow that now. We don't respect property rights anymore, or the rights of a small business owner that wants to keep their sidewalk open. But also, we've got an issue around the expense. It costs so much to live in Colorado. Inflation is the highest here in Colorado of anywhere in the country. And so people are really struggling to pay rent, to find a place to live, to pay a mortgage. So I think that plays into it as well. How do we solve it? With compassion, but tough love. We've got to clean up our streets and find places that can help these folks who are dealing with mental health, addiction, or economic issues.
So our next question on that subject comes from Mike, who lives in Denver, and he says that his kids are scared to go outside their own homes sometimes because of the situation that's occurring. If you drive through downtown Denver right now, unfortunately, you can see this firsthand. What do you say to that parent who's afraid to let their kids go outside, or to a senior citizen who's afraid themselves to go outside because of what they might face on the streets in Denver or in any city across Colorado?
Well, I would say help is on the way. I grew up with a dad who was a reserve police officer, and so I respect law and order. I've been out on the ground listening to law enforcement and community leaders about how we're going to fix these problems. I did a ride-along last week with El Paso County Sheriff, and we talked extensively about how they just don't feel like anyone has their back. They feel left out. They left out of the conversation on how to solve these problems, and they have ideas on how to do it. They need some funding, they need someone to have their back, to support them, and really give them the tools and resources they need to fight against this crime so that our kids can feel safe again.
Well, you mentioned law enforcement, and they have been the target of certain politicians over the last few years. They've had a rough go of it with support from politicians and from folks here in Colorado. What do you think Governor Polis has done over the last few years to contribute to that problem? I mean, our police don't have the support that they need here in Colorado. Certainly in our cities, they don't have the support. Has Governor Polis contributed to that problem in your mind?
Absolutely. He signed some terrible bills on crime and decriminalizing fentanyl, qualified immunity, making it harder and harder for law enforcement to do their job, and making sure that they have the resources, the funding. You can't mandate body cameras, which I think are a good idea, and law enforcement does too, but then expect these local municipalities to cover the cost when it's millions of dollars. Or you can't expect them to be able to recruit and retain officers if they're told, hey, if you get sued, you're personally liable. Now, we've got to balance that with making sure that our police officers are doing the right things, but that doesn't mean you have to be so punitive about it, and it has ripple effects throughout the system.
Well, and the consequences are real, as you know, that we've lost multiple police officers here in Colorado just in the last few weeks. An absolute tragedy for them and for their families. You attended a service for an officer that we just lost in Jefferson County here over the weekend. Tell me what it's like being with that community and hearing from them how they feel they've been treated over the last few years.
It's heartbreaking. I mean, they're so sad and just upset that they aren't allowed to do their job well. One of the bills that Polis signed makes it a requirement that they warn someone before they defend themselves. And it's a split second, but it's enough that it could cause an officer to lose their life. And so I get that they have good intentions, but these policies in real life are playing out with tragic consequences.
One of the biggest issues in Colorado is the issue of affordable housing. Young families, young single people in this state. I mean, it is more difficult now than ever to buy a house, and that has really been the key to unlocking the American dream over decades in this country. And unfortunately now we're in a situation where a lot of young folks, a lot of not so young folks anymore, people in their 30s and 40s, they've either never owned a house, they might not ever own a house because of the way that the economic system has worked out for them over the last few years. How do you plan on making it more affordable here in Colorado to buy a house, and not only buy a house, but also start unlocking that American dream and having that foundation of economic security in the ownership of a house?
I mean, that's so important. It's so important to creating wealth and living the American dream. It's actually part of our Community Spark program that we just launched for the African American and Hispanic community in some of the rural areas. Homeownership is critical to that. A fourth of the cost of new housing in Colorado is regulatory. So again, the size of government, the onerous regulations, taxes, fees, permitting process have made it so difficult for developers to build here.
Yep.
And for local municipalities, I get that they're trying to control growth a bit, but there are consequences to that. So how can we deal with this? Well, as governor, I can absolutely advocate for relaxing some of these regulations. You look at the Marshall Fire, what happened up there when so many people lost their homes. A lot of them can't rebuild because of the onerous green energy regulations that are on the building codes now. So I get we all want clean land, clean air, clean water, but we've gone too far, too fast in a lot of these situations. We also can look towards new innovative ways of housing, like community housing, co-housing, tiny homes, modular housing. We've got a great veterans community down in the Springs that's been built to allow veterans to afford to have a house through modular. So there's a lot of neat things we can do. Accessory dwellings, where if you have a house and your parents want to retire and they can't afford to get a place and retire, hey, maybe you can loosen up the zoning a little bit so they could build a small tiny home or something on the back of the house, or an accessory dwelling, just an extension to the house.
You've talked over the course of this interview and talking about all these different subjects. In many ways, the government is working against people in this state. I mean, if your house burns down in a wildfire and then you can't afford to rebuild that house because of government policies, or it takes years to rebuild that house that is the cornerstone of your life and also of your economic security, that's a huge problem for regular, everyday Coloradans. Just talk about your government philosophy overall. How do you see government helping people or getting out of the way so that people can succeed, instead of all of these different situations where the government in Colorado over the last 4 years has actively worked against people here in the state?
Yeah, and it's housing, it's small business owners who were shut down, mandated, quarantined, went way too far after COVID, and they suffered for that. In fact, in the first half of this year, we had 27% more small businesses close than previous years. So and the CU Business Index just came out. Small business owners are very pessimistic about what's going on. And then we've got parents who were told what to do, how to raise their kids, how to keep them healthy. At the end of the day, we've got to just trust people in Colorado to make good decisions for their life, their business, their family, their kids. I like to say the only thing I'm going to mandate is freedom. I just want the government to go back to a place where they trust people, they respect people, farmers, ranchers, energy workers, and let our economy thrive. Let parents do their work, let kids thrive, and let small business owners thrive without the heavy hand of Jared Polis and the government on them all the time.
Well, on that same topic, trust. Trust in government, trust in the people that are elected to go and serve. That trust has eroded more than ever that I've ever seen. People don't trust their elected officials. Oftentimes, and I think correctly, they think that these elected officials are out to only serve themselves instead of serving the people. So a two-part question for you. How do you plan on serving the people instead of these special interests in Denver, instead of serving yourself as a politician, making sure that focuses on the people? And then how do you also, as an office holder, as possibly Colorado's next governor, plan to stay humble in that role and really be focused on the right things?
Well, my kids and my husband keep me pretty humble at the end of the day, my parents too. But I've had a successful career. I've done kind of what I wanted to do, and now I just want to serve. I want to give back. I want to pay it forward and be the change we want to see in Colorado. And I have a heart for children, for kids, for folks in our economy and state that are struggling. I want to help them live the American dream like I was able to and protect it. So that's where my heart is. I think the way you do that is you listen. You listen to exhaustion. as a servant leader, the key to that is just making sure that you're always in touch with the people you're serving. And so traveling the state, going to lunch with people in different communities, going to festivals, parades, PTA meetings, whatever I can do to stay as in touch with people all over the state is what I'll do. I've done it as a candidate, and I'll do it as a governor.
Heidi, ballots are going out today, the end of this long journey that you've been on, running for governor for all of these months. As ballots go out and people are going to be sitting at their kitchen table, filling these ballots out, deciding whether to vote for you or not, what's your parting message to those folks about why you would be the best person in this role to improve our state, but also to improve their daily lives?
Well, our current governor is running for a second term to fix the problems that he created. And we are not better off than we were 4 years ago. In fact, I can't think of any area we are, whether you're a small business owner, a parent, or just someone who's just struggled through this high inflation, high crime that's hitting our state right now. So I have some big, bold ideas to solve these problems. As I said, I'm a problem solver. I'm not a politician. I'm a mom. I'm a business owner, and so passionate for Colorado. I just want to turn things around so our kids have a bright future. And I'm so excited to have the chance to be a voice for all of Colorado.
Heidi Ganahl, thank you so much for joining us for this kitchen table conversation. And thank you all for tuning in. Ballots go out today. Make sure you check your mailbox, fill those ballots out. Thank you for joining us, and we'll talk to you soon.